Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, welcome to the bonus run. Usually, this is a video game podcast that pairs a rookie discovering a game for the first time with a veteran returning to see how it all holds up. But this is the bonus run, an opportunity for myself and my guests to talk about new games where a veteran can't be found. For this episode, there is no guest, it's just me, your host Louis, and I go by the handle Lewbop. This episode is a test for the bonus run. I'm intending to make the bonus episodes regular, every 5-ish episodes, but also as and when big new releases happen that I might want to talk about. Before we get into the game, some notes. Firstly, spoilers. I'll keep heavy story beats and spoilers to the latter end of the podcast, and will provide a heavy warning for this. However, there will be some examples that I give that will have small spoilers for you. If you do want a completely blind and pure experience, then maybe play the game for the first time, but I will not be spoiling any twists, any turns, in case you want an impression of the game before playing. Secondly, if you're enjoying the rookie run or the bonus run, please follow, comment and leave a rating on your chosen podcast platform, and follow my social medias linked in the show description. Anyway, with that out of the way, today I'll be talking about Reanimal, which was released in February this year, 2026, across PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. It's a survival horror game with a lot of stealth and set pieces. If you've played games like Little Nightmares or Inside, it's similar to them, and that makes sense as it was developed by Tarsier Studios, who developed Little Big Planet 3, but more importantly, Little Nightmares 1 and 2. They, however, did not develop the third game in that series, and instead developed Reanimal under the publisher THQ Nordic. Before playing this game, I'd played all of Little Nightmares 1 and some of Little Nightmares 2, also enjoying games like Inside and Limbo. I remember seeing the advertisements for Reanimal and being super hyped. It seemed to be taking an even darker angle than Little Nightmares, and the animal body horror was really doing it for me, as weird as that sounds. A general introduction to this game: you play as the boy with your companion, the girl. You can play this co-op where both characters are controlled, but I played it on my lonesome, so the girl is AI controlled. You start playing as the boy who wakes up in a boat at sea wearing a sack on his head after a dream of himself and 4 other characters peering into a well. After some time driving the boat, he pulls the girl out of the ocean who is wearing a rabbit mask. Initially, she attacks him, but then gives it a rest, and interestingly, the characters have voices and some small lines of dialogue in this game, unlike previous releases by the studio. The boy says that he thought the girl was dead, and then the girl asks where are the others, which sets you on your path of the game, travelling through all manner of decayed and eerie environments, spanning from ocean cliffs to ruined cities, war-torn landscapes, but also some beautiful areas, all while solving puzzles and running and hiding from all manner of horrific monstrosities, often taking the form of mutilated animals. The first chunk of the game that I wanted to discuss was its presentation and its graphics. This is by far the best facet of this game. Almost everything about this game's presentation feels expertly crafted with the utmost attention to detail to ensure the world feels consistent, immersive, and oppressive. A lot of the whimsical nature of the Little Nightmares games are removed here. There's very little cuteness in this game, and it's one of the reasons I do prefer this game over Little Nightmares. A big helping hand that this game has is a more fluid and varied camera. In some instances, the game provides you with the ability to nearly fully rotate the camera, to marvel at the structures created which loom over you due to the out of proportion scale between the playable characters and the landscape around them, combined with a beautiful lighting engine, fog, and a great draw distance. It all feels like a natural evolution from the Little Nightmare games. This can be seen right from the start when you're travelling on the boat and the girl is holding her lantern. The way the light shimmers and reflects off the ocean onto these huge rock faces just looks amazing. Speaking more on the proportions though, the game perfectly achieves this feeling of the friendly characters being small and vulnerable, but not quite miniature. At times it can be difficult to understand if they're just children or like a smaller species. They can drive this speedboat, but then also slip through tiny cracks in walls. What it does achieve is promoting feelings of dread in large environments, and especially when facing some of the game's enemies. As mentioned earlier, the game does a beautiful job of taking you on a journey through varied environments. The care for the crafting of this game's vision can really be seen in the art, and there's collectible art within the game, and it's also featured in a limited art book that was sold with the collector's edition. If anyone has a copy of this book for sale, hit me up. I can't find it anywhere. Early on in the game, you begin seeing what I can only describe as like humanoid skin suits scattered around the environment, and after not long, as you can imagine, you're pursued by them. Well, after an intense chase section near the beginning of the game, you enter what appears to be a blown out forest. The trees stand tall with no leaves, as if they've been destroyed in battle, but instead of leaves, there are these skin suits hanging from all the branches. This was an example of one of the moments that just made me go like, oh shit. It's so ominous and creepy, but in a morbid way, it's such a stunning art direction, and there is a collectible art piece to marry up with this that you can then look at. Other scenes feature cold and abandoned towns, with a layer of what appears to be ash coating all the buildings, which are boarded up and crumbling, as well as World War I-esque battlefields bogged with mud, barbed wire, and strewn out bodies. I really enjoyed when the game switches to these war-torn environments. It hints at there being either a past or current war throughout the game, with water area full of water mines, and it gives an explanation to the destruction you see. But what is weird is that some of the environments have modernity to them, appliances like working washing machines and more advanced electronics that don't look quite of the era of the war, which can be quite interesting. But this is deliberately put in for story reasons, which I'll attempt to do my best at explaining later on. There's a somberness and sadness later in the game when the story starts patching itself together that at times really impacted me, but again, I'll have to save that for the spoiler section. But there are moments of respite. They're few, but they are there. There's a scene where you summit a large cliff and are met with a huge field of bright yellow flowers and a burning orange sky that made me put down my controller and just kind of like bask in it for a second. And having this contrast after a couple of hours of just pure oppression was like a welcome change. It all really pushes the world of this game into a sort of character of its own that can tell a story without dialogue or even moving. Attention to detail in these types of games is super important. They don't include epic gameplay or deep RPG mechanics. It's all about the story it's trying to tell and the emotions that it wants to pull out of you, and I think this game nails it. Animations and sound prompts happen just as you'd imagine. When you beach a speedboat, the sand parts way perfectly. When you duck under a hand dryer, it turns on for a little jump scare. Or there's a section where you're joined by some of the other characters when you're running through a big beautiful field and the characters run in almost an arrowhead formation with the plants brushing out of their way as the camera zooms out. The devs knew what this would make you feel after the horrors that you've been facing. An example when this really overwhelmed me with immersion and ambience was a section when you're back on your boat and you're venturing through a partially sunken town. You enter a grocery store, and as your boat produces wake and ripples in the water, glass bottles and shopping trolleys are gently bobbing in the water, clinking against the fridges. In the distance of the store, there are these bloated, drowned humanoid enemies that will be rummaging through the leftover stock and gently sipping on some milk, and then they slip into the dark water, gurgling. It absolutely produces the type of horror ambience that I just love. I found that the sounds of this game all lean into creating ambience rather than having super noticeable tracks. Not to say they're bad at all. The overarching soundtrack mostly positions itself in the background with tracks that are crafted to add tension, or in chase sections provide frantic adrenaline surges, and as mentioned, in the world, the sound effects are excellent. The environments move and react with your character and the physics. Sometimes loud environmental sound cues will distract you, or draw your attention to other things that are going on, and at times they'll just downright overwhelm you with sound. And then, of course, there's the sounds of the enemies. But I need to take a minute to talk about the enemies as a whole. Initially, due to the marketing and, well, the name of the game, I presumed all of the enemies were going to be this animal morph type. And they are there, but I did think they were more as and when, which, whilst I can see the importance of making these spectacles, I thought there could have been more moments with them. A lot of the time you're facing these different human or humanoid figures. Early on you encounter one aptly named the Sniffer, I believe. Essentially an elongated human that may feel familiar from past games by the studio. The skin suits and then also the bloated drowned corpse humans, you all have encounters with them quite often. And whilst, yeah, they're creepy and their out of ordinary movements are odd and spooky, personally I think they're a bit overused. It makes sense in the story, but considering what I thought was going on with the game and what I thought I was going to be seeing in the game, I was a little bit disappointed here. However, when you do see the animals, they are awesome. Without spoiling too many of them, they mostly take the form of recognizable animals, farm animals. But if that animal pumped a bunch of gear, died, reanimated or reanimalated, and then pumped more gear mixed with uranium, they're huge sprawling creatures with off-proportion features, sometimes humanoid limbs that crack and contort to fit themselves into the environments they're in, and they almost serve as these otherworldly beasts that just hold the rest of the world's inhabitants hostage. And I really enjoyed all of the times that they are on screen. I just wish we could have seen more of them. So moving on to the gameplay, it's about what you expect with these types of games, but with some twists and turns, which I'll include halfway through this section when I introduce the spoilers. For a large amount of this game, you're arriving at an area via your boat or a bus or some means of transport, and then in this area looking for the other children whilst completing environmental puzzles, stealth sections, chase sections. Whilst none of the puzzles are particularly difficult or stumped me, and none of the stealth sections led to me getting caught very often or feeling that intense, the set piece sections that mainly fall into chase sequences were excellent. This is when the adrenaline really pumps. You'll be chased by a big animal or a pack of smaller creatures and humans. The world will crash with the enemy movements. Their clobbering footsteps will pound in your ears. The soundtrack will pump up its momentum. They're inventive and exciting to watch. I got myself killed multiple times not paying attention to the character movements because I was too busy watching all of the things going off in the background. They are truly epic, and there are multiple that I want to point out later. Another feature in this game is combat, and this is where some of my gripes fall. With the gameplay, there's two types of combat. Well, there's a third one at the end, but anyway. One of your combat options that only really comes into use in two situations is that you get a crowbar, which you can use for prying doors open and then whacking either seagulls or like sand children. There's no tactic to it, it's just auto lock-on button mashing that feels fine the first time you do it, but in general it adds no depth to the game and feels a bit tacked on. I will say that there are some cool animations when fighting the sand people though. There's a bit where one of them will hold down your companion and beat them against the floor, where you'll need to go and save them, and I'm sure this probably would have been fun to do in co-op. Then there's also the harpoons. At one point in the game, the girl acquires some harpoons, which you then have infinite of whilst you're in the boat. You throw these at the swimming bloater enemies, and also at sea mines to clear paths. It auto locks on when any of these things are near, but there are a few instances where the lock-on just wouldn't work for me, or the game would present me with multiple enemies that, if they get close to you, will just instant kill you. But it got so frustrating, and there was a particular section where I died a good few times. However, when it is working, it does feel good and adds some nice intense sections, and as well, it's used well in one particular boss encounter. This and the other games like it aren't pushed out for the gameplay to hook you in. The gameplay is there as a vehicle to get you through its amazing world design and epic set pieces, where a lot of the time the game is just playing itself with some minor directional control. Good enough, but yeah, nothing to shout about. Okay, from here on out, spoilers. As I mentioned before, from this point I'm going to be talking about spoilers. Nothing is off limits, okay? So if you haven't played it and you're intrigued, obviously stop listening. Alright? Good. I think it makes sense for me to start with that third combat section. A fucking tank. I did not expect to see a fully drivable, shootable tank section in this game. It took me by surprise, and it was very cool as a lead up to the final section. Which also reminds me of, in general, one of my favourite sections in the entire game, which is the battlefield war-torn section. It's so strong all the way through. You start by sneaking through trenches with soldiers just executing themselves. It's super shocking and brutal. There's a part where you're going through an infirmary and they're crawling after you, blowing themselves up with hand grenades, and then you get introduced by the sniper. This bit I just loved so much. You walk into a room with a blown out wall looking over a big city backdrop, bombs and gunfire exploding in the background, and in the middle of the room is a soldier playing a piano. Like the creaking of his movements and his gentle breathing and the broken, kind of badly played somber song he's playing. It's beautiful, and I sat for a minute to hear out the whole song. I really didn't know what I was expecting when I was going to approach him. I thought maybe he would be like the one friendly human, but no, you get near him, he turns around and then just gets his brains splattered by a sniper. And I really like the sniper in this because you hear the gunshot go off and then there is a pause for the bullet to hit you. It's just that attention to detail again is really, really good. After this, you then go in a long section with the sniper where you're essentially being targeted by him. You hide in the shadows and he takes pot shots at you. A really cool little attention to detail feature here is that at some point you pick up a Brody helmet, one of the circular, flattish World War I style helmets that the British Army would wear. And it's one of the masks you can have, which I forgot to mention this, but you can find little masks around the game that you can swap out for the boy and the girl in the menu. But this one's unique because the sniper, when he hits you, it bounces off the helmet, which you then unfortunately lose, which I just thought was a really nice little touch. You spend quite some time hiding from this sniper, and eventually you get to a section where you push a car that you're using as cover whilst he's taking pot shots at you, and you come across a bazooka which you use to blow the sniper out of his perch. After this section is when you trudge across what's essentially no man's land towards the tank that you then commandeer. This section's so good. There's like soldiers stumbling around or sinking in the mud, moaning. I'm not sure if they attack you if they see you. It didn't happen to me, so I'm not sure. The whole time you're in this section as well, the giant sheep lamb animal is running havoc on the streets, devouring corpses and growing huge. It's sprouting human limbs, crushing buildings, making horrible noises. You also get a couple stealth encounters with it. The whole area is by far the best section of the game, and a great lead up to that finale where you kill the sheep in the tank. Another standout section for me is the pelican seagull monster thing. After trekking through the big beautiful field of flowers, you happen upon a barn which has a giant pig friend in it. Anyway, you move to the top of the barn and then into a lighthouse where you find one of the other children you were looking for in a cage. You manage to free him, and then this huge, horrible, gangly bird chases you through the farm, again just rampaging and destroying everything. As you get closer to the barn, there's like a ton of smaller seagulls just dive bombing you, splatting all over the floor with like a proper thud. It's brutal. You make it back to the barn and then you get saved by your pig friend. There's also a section where you get some diving suits and you use them to go under the water and retrieve an eye from a carcass to return to a giant whale that's beached on a battleship. This section was cool but so short. Being underwater in games always freaks me out. Soma and Bioshock are horrid for me. I would have loved to see some cool gameplay mechanics introduced in this section with the water and, you know, the buoyancy of the characters, but it's just quite short. It does feature a cool chase section though, so that's okay. The game does have a big popular feature in games like Dark Souls where you return to previous areas in a big interconnected world. At first in this game it confused me and I thought it might just be a lazy convenience by the devs. You get into the back of a seemingly random military truck and it takes you right back to where you left the boat last, and it seemed really odd at first, but it does then make sense with my interpretation of the story that I've gathered through other people, which I guess leads me onto the story. Right, I am going to butcher this, and I'm not outlining the whole plot beat for beat. I'm going to assume that if you're listening this far in, you've played the game, or at least seen a playthrough of it. Right, initially, my takeaway for this game was that its hidden meaning was that it was trying to convey a message of how animals are caught up in the atrocities that humans create, and that their behaviour is then moulded by how we, as humans, shift their environments against their will. And I still stand by this for a few reasons. The girl is presented as a rabbit and is often a victim. Many of the animals you encounter seem somber and longing for change. The pigs are trapped in the barn, the whale is beached on the warship missing its eye, all culminating in a war where you don't really see any animals, presumably because they're all dead. But if this was the case, I'd maybe expect to see dead horses on the battlefields, and see humans harming the animals in the war sections. So maybe I'm right, maybe I'm not. I was still confused on the children and why the girl is having this sheep basically erupt from inside her. I couldn't quite gather the presence of the children. I presume they just represented the helpless animals. And then after the credits ended, it really confused me. They push the girl back into the well and kill her. I couldn't understand why, and you then see her begin to convulse, and the well fills with water. Her body is rising to the top. Maybe this represented the animals on Earth, that they won't give up and they'll continue to adapt to their environment. Anyway, after finishing the game and writing down my thoughts about it, I went online to see what other creators thought of the story and to see if there was a consensus explanation. There doesn't really seem to be, but one did stand out to me, and I do agree with their theory, so shout out to the game theorists. They surmise that the children are orphans who have clearly been subjected to multiple past traumas. The children begin to theorize to themselves that the girl is a bad omen, which is represented by the white rabbit or white hare, which in Nordic and Celtic folklore, a white hare can be representative of bad luck and death. If you approach the hare, you will be drawn down a road of death. And you can even find her coffin in-game, and when you open it, the shadow of a hare pops out. As such, the children knock the girl out and throw her into the well to kill them, which you see them do. She is, however, then resurrected as a lamb, which is another animal often seen in religion to be sacrificed for the purpose of ridding omens. So the children sacrifice the girl to stop the awful things that are happening in their life and the war. And it's indicated that they got these ideas from the orphanage that they grew up in due to the abundance of candles and religious iconography. And there's in the orphanage, you see the item that they do a blood pact around in one of the cutscenes. But after this, obviously the troubles that plagued the children weren't stopped. They'd essentially been brainwashed and became sheeple, if you will, due to this cult. And all of the children are then punished and killed in different ways, which can be seen when you find the coffins of the different characters. And as such, they're now stuck in purgatory, reliving their nightmares in an essential hell, where they're facing their nightmares and completing the killing of the girl over and over. And then this explains the weird eras of the environments not making sense. Like I said earlier, there being modern appliances, but then what looks like World War One. And it also explains the abuse of the children by humans, and them being scared of animals, the war. It's each of the children's traumas just being relived over and over and over. Then that ending with the girl rising out of the well just shows that it's going to keep happening. And when I played the game, I clearly missed one of the coffins and didn't get the secret ending. But in this secret ending, instead of the girl's body rising out of the well, other small children approach her body and push her body down into the water, which I guess symbolizes her forgiveness at the end of the cycle after witnessing what happened to her brothers and sisters throughout the game as punishment for them killing her. There is a DLC on the way which might give a different explanation or might just expand on the world as a whole, but I like this explanation, and credit to the game theorists for pulling that all together, because I certainly didn't see it that deeply. I do still stand by my theory of the game representing the abuse of animals by humans, but that's just a theory. No, I'm not stealing that. Anyway, so that brings me to the end of this bonus run episode. It was a really short one because it was just me talking. I didn't have a guest to bounce off. But in the future, I will hopefully have guests for new games on this bonus episode. Overall, I really enjoyed the short and sweet time with Reanimal. I'm a big fan of this genre of game and look forward to the DLC. It's nice to see that the devs were able to leave little nightmares and create something else and then achieve success with it. So nothing else to say on this one. If you're still here, I hope you enjoyed listening to me ramble for a while. Keep your eye out for future episodes, and bye.